Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Sophia. I manage and organize Spectrum events for you, bringing the community together through learning at Spectrum. So for those of you who are new to Spectrum, aside from organizing webinars, we touch on current affairs like these and forward-looking ones. We run physical events at our beautiful space at Duo Tower. We also offer workspaces for the community experience and bring together members and provide the connections to expand their business. So today's webinar is entitled, Can the F&B Industry Emerge Stronger from COVID-19? Spectrum is privileged to have these panelists on board with us. So before I introduce each and every one of them, participants, if you have any questions, please post them onto the channel here. So first up, I have Alexis Bauduin. He's the owner and founder of YOLO. Alexis found the motivation to set up YOLO after heading business development for Tony Fernandez's Caterham Group. We are no stranger to YOLO. They provide tasty and healthy good food with both physical establishments and online presence. So Alexis will provide his perspective as a business owner, also to share with us the challenges and opportunities faced at today's discussion. Next up, I have Keith Jaggard. He's the Regional Country Manager, Southeast Asia of The Entertainer. So The Entertainer is a lifestyle app with thousands of one-for-one and discount dining offers at some of the best brands in the market. So Keith has more than 15 years experience in the F&B industry, from the UK to Spain and now in Singapore. It'll be interesting to hear from Keith on both sides of the market and with the company's global presence at today's discussion. Next up, I have Tim Davis. Tim is the co-founder and COO of Waiter. Waiter provides mobile ordering and payment technology to restaurants, cafes, and bars in Singapore and Europe. He spent his career mostly in MNCs, such as Australia's third largest bank, Knorr, and one of Unilever's biggest food brands. So Tim will share his perspective as a business owner and which business plays an important part of the ecosystem at today's discussion. Last but never the least, the moderator for today is the founder of oncoffeemakers.com, Ebenezer Heng. He designs classes for Food Hotel Asia, National Library Board, and tertiary institutions. Ebenezer has worked with F&B hospitality companies through the programs he created. So without further ado, Ebenezer, I'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. So good evening, guys. Thanks for joining us. Now, currently, of course, we all know that we're in the midst of the biggest crisis anyone has ever faced, COVID. Now in Chinese, the word for crisis is called 危机. So in it is really the opportunities. And we also believe that in every crisis lies opportunity to be discovered. And not just any opportunities, but technology-enabled opportunities. In fact, this is what the government is also actively promoting. And very importantly, today we have with us panelists that run established technology platforms serving the food and beverage industry. So as the panelists share their insights, please feel free to key in your questions that you have and that you want to address, to pick the brains of the panelists and to augment the overall experience of this particular webinar. Just give you a rundown on what we'll be chatting about in the next 1 hour. First, we'll touch on the major transformation happening in this industry, the impact on F&B business. Then after that, we will move on to have some understanding on the current ecosystem between the food and beverage owners, the system platforms provider, and the consumers. Of course, talking about crisis, nothing is complete without addressing the challenges for the F&B industries. And this will be one portion that we'll be spending some time on. We will be finishing off this webinar with what are the wins, what are the triumphs that we can look forward to. And of course, some imagination on what we believe the industry will look like after COVID. So with that, let's begin. Let's talk about the transformation. Now, of course, the F&B industry is facing a major transformation. Although after phase 2, even phase 2 is happening just right, a few hours later, the measures imposed are plenty. So there's initially we were just talking about just take away delivery, and moving forward, we are talking about safe distancing, safe entry, scanning of identity card, contact tracing, and all this. So massive transformation in the food and beverage industry. Let's hear from our panelists on how this regulation have impacted their businesses. So I'm starting with Alexis. So 2020 poses a different challenge for food business owners. How has the food and beverage industry changed since COVID and during the circuit breaker? Alexis?
Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the question. I think that, obviously it's been quite a year, and, you speak about transformation, and, it feels like, we went, the whole industry went through like a huge grinder. And like obviously I think everybody can, like I've seen, restaurants, close, and obviously us being stuck at home has, completely changed the landscape for us. But, I feel like, giving some numbers is something that would, pretty much like enlighten, like the situation, and bring some reality to what is happening, because, like, even though like we are coming out of confinement, like, and I think we've seen a ton of brands already, closing, and closing for goods. I think the worst is yet to come, for our industry. And just to, like, so bring some key numbers, right? So 75%, of F&B outlets have had a drop of more than 60% in revenue. 55% of, of the outlets have had a drop of more than 80% in revenue. And only 7.5% of the outlets have had, like revenues affected by less than 20%. So I think when you look into this, into this statistic, right, it brings reality, in a different light. And, and of course, like a lot of us have been greatly affected by, the walk-in, being basically like, shut. For example, myself, right, I had to close, 2 outlets out of 4. And I still, was fortunate to, keep 2 outlets and open and still have like, decent business on those 2 outlets. But, like, unfortunately, like a lot of F&Bs, didn't have that chance and didn't have that, that opportunity. And, like 70% of, like the F&B, outlet that were part of that survey, said that they had, closed some of their outlets. So, like the situation is very bad. I'll say like the one thing that was, like I think that we all been very grateful is we've received some, good support from the government, and it comes from, help for, of course, like rentals, for salaries, for levies, and, that has, helped us survive. But then again, speaking on like a whole industry, like altogether, and not my personal case, I think that, like very, very serious problems lie ahead. Once those help are gonna stop, the business is gonna go back to, to how it was. And a lot of outlets and a lot of brands that, spend big dollars, to get really good locations, are just gonna, they're just gonna bleed to death. And I think that, like, now there needs to be some serious conversations to discuss about, what is gonna happen, post confinement, because, obviously everybody, like the industry has changed, the consumer behavior has changed, and we'll discuss about this, during the conversation. So yes, it's, it's a very, very dark time for us.
Thank you, Alexis. I just want to expand on two points that you brought up. Okay, very interesting points. The 7% that still enjoy has less than 20% drop in their revenue. Is there any like names or like cluster, whether they are fast food restaurants or whether they are like normal restaurants or catering? The 7% that did not suffer a huge drop, what type of F&B are they?
So, like this survey, and that I'm basically quoting, right, was done by GLL. And actually, like, so a lot of the, the fast food brands were actually, like least impacted. And I think that, for multiple reasons. I think number one is also price point. Number two is, like already the, the user experience for the customers, like a lot of customers are used to order these brands online, or just, go and take away. So since the takeaway is still available, I think the brands are very affordable, You know, I've been, you know, and have like also like huge database and you know, good loyalty programs. I've been able to, you know, and some of them still thrive, you know, like, you know, and we still have outlets that, you know, like, and brands that, you know, thriving there. You know, when I look at my, you know, personal case, you know, we feel like we're very fortunate. We know we're in the bottom bracket, you know, our business is being, knowing that, you know, like I shut down 2 outlets and 2 of my outlets are still greatly affected. But, you know, the savior for us was our online business. And, you know, like we're already quite established through, you know, through a milk plant delivery service that we have. And then we, you know, I think like, you know, like adapted very quickly and launched like a whole new business unit, which is called YOLO Mart, which allows people to basically like, you know, like buy their grocery online. And you know, using all our favorite, you know, our favorite ingredients. So those two together really allow to, you know, I say like counterbalance what was happening to the, you know, to the offline business basically.
Thanks. Just one more question, which I believe that the user will have in mind. So you mentioned that you have 4, and then you close down 2, which are the other 2 that is open. How do you make a decision which to close and which to open? Like, is there a benchmark, or is it based on past historical data, or like, because everything is quite dynamic right now, right, during the COVID?
Yeah, of course. Like, you know, so, you know, of course on our side, you know, it was based on, you know, on revenues that we're generating, but also like location, you know, because we selected, you know, outlets, you know, to keep open that had like you know, a good coverage when it comes to, you know, to deliveries, especially for like the, you know, delivery aggregators, like, you know, like Deliveroo, Foodpanda, GrabFood. So, you know, we tried to be strategic, you know, when it came to, you know, our outlets, and keep the ones that, you know, we felt would, you know, do better on those platforms, and then close, you know, the ones that were more, you know, towards like office crowd, you know, and a good example is our Raffles Place outlet. You know, Raffles Place is probably the busiest, you know, like one of the busiest locations in Singapore, and now it's basically like, you know, like the location in Singapore that suffers the most. So yeah, so, you know, we looked at it from like a strategic point of view of location and sales revenues.
I think a lot of the merchants are looking at the data, yeah, and looking at data where people are dining in now and people are at home. They're not in the CBD as much anymore, right? The CBD outlets and restaurants are the ones that are suffering the most probably now, whereas before they were thriving, as you said. Yeah,
now it's quite opposite, right?
Yeah.
Just right, Keith. I was just going to ask, like, from a service platform provider point of view, right? What do your F&B merchants, user, and providers experience in the transformation, and how are they managed?
So, I mean, for us as a mobile app, I mean, we've obviously seen a big pivot towards takeaway, delivery, online takeaway, for example. I mean, for us as a brand, it's not something that, you know, we've really looked at in that much detail. I mean, we've always had a takeaway section in the app, but it's always been kind of like a walk-in takeaway. And, you know, with everything that's gone on with COVID-19, we've had to really, you know, accelerate our plans in looking at delivery and looking at online takeaway. To be honest, delivery was never something we looked at too much in Singapore, simply because we thought it was such a crowded space. So we kind of stayed away from it. You got 3 massive companies, you know, all fighting for market share with very, very big marketing budgets. And it's just something that we haven't really looked at. But obviously with everything that's happened, we had to react. We had to pivot our business as well. I mean, our business was predominantly dine in, and we've had to pivot our business to you know, try and grab some of that takeaway, delivery and online takeaway market over the past month, or 2 months, should I say. And it's going to continue. I mean, that's for sure. You know, tomorrow we go into phase 2, but there are capacity restrictions. People are still going to be probably a little bit scared to go out like before. The government are advising not to specifically go out and dine and visit, you know, 15 different households in the same day. So it's going to be around for a while. We've just got to hope that, you know, obviously phase 3 or phase 2B or whatever the next, I don't know what the next phase is, but the next phase kicks in, so that we can go back to normal.
Just one follow-up question. So you mentioned that like you did some pivoting, and then you also move on to delivery. I mean, the truth is, I understand that some other digital platform also did the same thing. And may I say that a lot of F&B merchants, they are actively signing up with a lot of platforms. That means other than the usual established one, they're also signing up for maybe for yours and for any other that offer delivery. What is your take on this? Right? Is it good? Is it bad for you, for the merchants?
It's good for the market because, you know, theoretically more competition should bring the fees down, right? I mean, it should make it a more competitive space, and the more competition there is, and obviously, you know, businesses have to become smarter. So I do think it's good. The question is whether, you know, how long this is gonna, you know, last. Someone like you know, Choke, for example, similar. You know, they've never really gone into delivery, and they went into delivery. I suppose it's a question of how long are they gonna maintain that? Is that here for the long term? Is it just something for 2020, for example? You know, we know that their business is certainly not delivery, but I do think it's a good thing.
And Keith, thanks for sharing. Okay, now I have a question for team. So Waiter has an ordering and payment apps is another part of the ecosystem that will have been impacted during the COVID. What is the transformation that you have observed and is currently going through, team?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So first of all, as much as we have apps, that's only a part of our business. So we also enable customers to order and pay from their mobile phone just within a browser. And so in terms of stats, the mobile app orders are actually a smaller percentage of our business than the people ordering through just a browser. And so in answer to your question, how's COVID impacted us and the industry as a whole? Obviously, there's massive growth in terms of online ordering. And so players like, Keith mentioned Choke. So they've moved into delivery. We also built a delivery function. Much like Keith, we had no plans at all of doing delivery. In fact, exactly the same reasoning as Keith. There are 3 major players all fighting for market share. We had no interest. We specialize in dine-in and takeaway. And that's what we've always done. But our business model is that we charge a fixed fee per month and then a small fee per transaction. And so all of our restaurant partners called us when the circuit breaker happened and said, how soon can you build delivery? Because we can't maintain the big fees that the platforms are paying. And so we very rapidly built a very basic delivery function where they could accept orders and payments for delivery through our system. And then the restaurant would be responsible for organizing the delivery, whether they did it themselves because they had spare capacity in their staff, or whether they got a player like Lala Move or Grab Express or someone else to deliver the food. And so there was demand for delivery, but it nowhere near offset the decline in dining. So our numbers match exactly with what Alexis is saying. So we took a massive hit in the volumes in terms of dining. Obviously, dining closed. So dining went from big to 0. And then takeaway did go up in some areas, but our focus for takeaway was on the CBD because that's where all the people were who were time poor and wanted our takeaway service. And so the CBD died. And so we had a massive decline in takeaway as well. And so, yes, we were able to build delivery, but it didn't offset that. At the same time, there was huge demand from restaurants for our service in general because they see that digitization of their platforms, now's the time to do it. Now's the time that customers are going to be accepting, ordering and scanning a QR code, placing an order, making payment from their phones because A, it's contactless. B, there's a reason why restaurants can do it. There's capacity constraints. There's things like increasing table turns, having fewer staff, processing more orders. And so we had more inbounds than we've ever had before, just as a result of COVID. And so Waiter as a company will benefit in the long term, but our revenues over the past few months have taken a massive, massive hit. So I think as an industry, we're all hurting. And we have been hurting. And we align ourselves with our restaurant partners and they're all bleeding. And so the question is how much we can all get through this and how much we will benefit from it in the long term.
So one follow-up question. So you mentioned that, of course, dine took a massive hit, obviously, because of the circuit breaker. So right now we're going into phase 2. And with the government saying that there's a new normal, right? The phase 3 and all. Don't know how long that's going to last. What if the dine-in would not go back to the usual and it's just like maybe at 60%, 70%? Do you think the delivery will at one point match up in terms of revenue, say in 3 months, 4 months now?
Do you mean for waiter or for restaurants?
We just say for take from the perspective of waiter and even like in the whole industry.
Okay, for waiter, I don't see that happening. So here in Singapore, delivery is only a small portion of our business, and we're not strategically, we're not looking at making it as good of a solution as what Grab and Foodpanda does. It will be decent and it will serve a purpose, but we're never going to aim to compete with Grab and Foodpanda. So from a user experience perspective, I think that it will be really hard for us to get people to think of waiter first when they're choosing delivery. And so we do it, and if our restaurant partners benefit from that, and we're able to provide a service to restaurant partners, and the people who want to support the restaurants go through us because it means that the restaurants make more money, then that fills the need for both the users and the restaurants, and that's great. But it won't be a big part of our business here in Singapore, and globally, it definitely won't be part of our business. So globally, we see that a dine-in is the space to go, even in the COVID environment. And the reason I say that is even if you open up 20% of your restaurant capacity, then what you want is people to be able to turn over those tables faster. You want to have fewer staff. You want to be able to have contactless ordering. All of the things which we do fit seamlessly into that. And so we forecast that we're actually going to see increased revenue for waiter. So the question more broadly is about the industry. And I think that Alexis can probably touch on this better than I can, but my understanding from speaking with all of our clients is that they haven't structured their businesses historically to cater to that kind of setup. And so 80% of your volume usually comes from dine-in as a restaurateur, and only 20% is generally delivery or takeaway. And in that environment, if you change it so that 80% of your revenue is coming from delivery and from the margins that the delivery players are charging, then you can't cover the rent just because of the math just doesn't work out. And so I think that that there would have to be a shift in the business models for the restaurants to use that space to do something with the rent. And so I'm not really one to give strategic advice on how to manage that, but unless the restaurants are set up in different ways, like cloud kitchens or in different locations, then maybe they can adapt to that. But I can't really comment.
Thanks for giving the views and some perspective on this. So for those that just join us, the audience, feel free to key in your question in the Q&A session. So we were just talking about the transformation in the F&B industry. So right now I'm going to move into just now what we touched on quite a bit, the delivery platforms. So some businesses, of course, have their own. So they are actively doing delivery, and like what some of the panelists have shared, they augment some of their offerings to even offer delivery service. Some that decided that they don't want to do delivery, they probably have closed for the period. So, but the fact is, almost every company, every F&B company are using some form of delivery, and most of them has some grosses about the high fees. So here's a question to Alexis. To better the revenue for F&B, are delivery companies like Deliveroo, Foodpanda, and GrabFood the only answer for existing F&B establishment? We talk about right now, of course, or even in the next 6 months. Yeah.
Well,
Alex.
I mean, like, I think that, delivery has been a topic of conversation for many years. And now I think that, a lot of F&Bs are really starting to, pay attention to it and pay attention to the situation. But, I was part of like a leading group that, really raised some questions because we are in a lose-lose situation, when it comes to, to the delivery business. We're working with partners, and I say partners, right? Because this is, how the relationship is settled. But the reality is that, when you look at the delivery business, you look at the fees and the commission structure, and they're already taking a big chunk of your sales, right? So and I think that Pete mentioned it very well in his answer, right? If you are only 20% of your revenues or food deliveries, it's something that you can manage, right? You can attribute that to some part of like marketing cost, and brand presence, and getting that first customer to try your brand. to entice him to come to your store. But if you reverse that, and then you give, which is the average, like 30% commission away, how does the math work, right? And I think that this is where it gets extremely troublesome. And the reality with since confinement and COVID, right? What has happened now on those platforms? Number one, a ton of players that were either using only one outlet or only one aggregator or no aggregator now are have been inquiring to go on the platform. And basically is every single F&B outlets have been like really trying to get on anything and just trying to get any type of sales, right? So number one, they're coming in and they're probably negotiating terrible commission rates. And then number two, right? Once you're on those platforms, what you need is sales. But now there's a ton more outlets out there, right? There's so many more outlets that, you need visibility. And so I think that now a ton of players are realizing like, all right, I need visibility. Especially because, the radius through the years has reduced and reduced and reduced. So now, like even just like 2 years ago, you could deliver within 5.5 kilometers from your restaurants. Now, and players like, and players like Grab, for example, give you 2.5 kilometers, but sometimes during peak hours, they give you 500-meter radius. So, like you're literally fighting for customers that, are literally like, could walk to your outlet. So, there's an element of, like there's so many outlets out there that how do you get visibility? Well, those merchants tell you, all right, give discounts. So give 10% discount, give 20% discount, give 30% discounts. But let's be clear, right? If your commission rate is 30%, and on top of that, you give a 20% discount that, they charge you in actual dollars, you literally have 50, percent out of the window. And how do you, how do you survive? You can't. You're literally losing money in every single meal that leaves your kitchen. And and so the problem is on multiple areas, right? Is on the commission structure, is on the fact that the radius is very small. So why the radius is very small? Because those companies are not making money either, right? So we're not making money, they're not making money, and basically, right, the smaller the radius, the higher the risk of like basically them stealing your customers for walk-ins is important. And that's also a reality, and I see team like smiling and yeah, and that's something that like we've been like, it's an argument that we've been bringing forward a lot, right? Because one of the issues is when you do those deliveries, you do not own any type of information, any type of contact, any type of emails, right? So this is where the situation like that we're facing right now is an opportunity to to start to develop your own deliveries, right? Mm. But of course, here is another limitation in Singapore is the cost of delivery. When you use a third party like company to to help you process those deliveries, yeah, the cost is huge. It's not like if you're in Indonesia and it's easily executable, right? Here it's very costly. So, the math is just extremely difficult, and as soon as you do this, you need minimum orders, you need a ton of orders, and not just like minimum order value, but a ton of orders as well. And then you're fighting against a ton of other companies that are slashing prices, giving huge discounts. And, so ultimately who gets spoiled is the consumer, right? The consumer has so much choice right now. And he's facing so many discounts that I'll say the convenience is so high that at some point something will have to change. The customer will will have to understand that they probably need to pay more expensive if they want the food to to reach their home versus going to a restaurant. But at some point something's going to have to give in because the situation is just it's just not sustainable for anybody.
So just now, one question, I think maybe Keith or Alexis, you can answer, but just is something like Alexis mentioned, to develop your own, right? So just now, so Alexis mentioned earlier that the 7%, most of them are fast food. They have their own platform, and to a certain extent, quite a number of them have their own fulfillment. They're able to deliver. So perhaps that's one of the reasons why they're closer to the customer. So maybe Keith first, what are your views on for F&B merchants or this developing their own apps, their own delivery and their own fleet to deliver?
Well, I mean, I think that, as Alexis touched on it just now, there's been a lot of talk, obviously, about the high fees that the delivery platforms charge. It's been in the press a lot because it's the only alternative there is right now. We've been, locked down with no dine-in for 2 months. So the only thing you could do was either set up your own or jump on the bandwagon and try and get on all platforms. And I think one of the challenges there's a situation during these last 2 months whereby a lot of what we were seeing was a lot of restaurants were using their service staff to deliver some of their items, maybe using a private delivery company like Tim mentioned earlier, and then you've got a post or phase 2, if you like, reality, which will be obviously the dine-in staff will be going back to work, and they're not going to be able to do the deliveries anymore. I think one of the biggest challenges that the restaurants will have if they do try and go down their own delivery route will be manpower, because manpower is one of the biggest challenges there is in Singapore for the restaurant industry. So I think what's going to happen is the market will adjust to new opportunities, and I think we've started to see it. I mean, if you compare Singapore to other markets around Asia or other markets around the world, you've got kind of like the big three with the potential of maybe even Gojek or GoFood. I think is going to enter. You'd have 4 massive players fighting for that. Then you've got other platforms that are starting to do commission, which is a bit more mid-tiered. And then I did see a company, I can't remember what the name of it was, just a couple of weeks ago, I saw there was a company that was going to be launching pretty much minimal commission. I think it was 0% commission, and then they were going to add kind of like a 5 or a 6% to the cost of the items for ordering delivery. So you're kind of seeing people coming into that space where the opportunity is. But I think the biggest difference is the engagement of the database. You can set up, an app which is going to charge nothing to the restaurant, 5% extra, which I don't think people would have issues in paying. But if people aren't using that app, it doesn't mean much. At the end of the day, you need that traffic. So I think that's where the balance is, and it's trying to find that balance of getting people to take up those apps, and that's the only way the industry is going to change, or at least that's how I see it.
Thanks, Keith. We have some questions coming in. I will address that. I'll forward it to the panelists shortly. But first, let me ask Tim. What about your merchants? Did they share with you what are your takes of your merchants on this delivery, the fees and all?
I sort of touched on it earlier. I think that the reason restaurants came to us is because they said your model is different. You only charge a minimal fee per transaction. And so the more volume that goes through Waiter, the better the return on investment for the restaurants, because they're paying us a monthly fee and a really small fee per transaction. And so I think Alexis and Keith pretty much covered this question. Like, the restaurants don't see it as a sustainable option to pay such high percentages to the delivery players. They don't see like they've got many choices, because it's go with the delivery players who give them some sales, or don't make any sales at all if you're in a quiet area where everyone's staying at home. And so I think it's really, really tricky. We've seen some restaurants doing unique things to use different options. So as an example, one of our clients recently started selling their food through retail, as in they were literally now selling meal at home kits. And so that means that the product, or the people knew their brand, it was in their stores, and now they can buy it in, I don't know if it was cold storage or NTUC, Fair Price, but it was one of the two. And I was like, that's a really cool pivot for a brand, because they've got chefs who can prepare the food, and they're able to sell it. Now, and obviously Alexis has already mentioned that he's got an online business. And so I think maybe he could comment further on what are the options outside of delivery. Because obviously I'm just going to be tooting my own horn if I say that restaurants should use Waiter.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, Keith.
Yeah.
Alexis. Is it Alexis?
Sorry. No. So just to add to that, one of the things I wanted to mention, right, is so there are opportunities, and I think that one of the key things that I don't see, like, and I don't, see other, like brands do enough is retention. Like when you're an online business, the only thing that you look at is retention of your users, right? So, then again, like for my brand, we were lucky because, when this hit, right, we already had, the infrastructure, we had all the logistics, we had the products, and, like, and then it's really, like, it's online or offline. How are you going to make sure that you retain your customers? Because, the offer is going to increase, and you need to make sure that, you create that USP, right? And so, I'm lucky enough that I'm in a space that, which is, healthy eating, where, that, there's a direct correlation to people being confined at home, right? People being, at home, they're moving a lot less, they're burning a lot less calories, they're putting on weight. Problem there, right? And this is where my brand could, like, easily come. So, we worked a lot on, like, content. We worked a lot on, on education. We brought we worked a lot on, like, our digital campaigns, and I think that we were, very, very efficient on that front. And then again, we invested heavily, in online campaigns, just to make sure that, we're, like, that we have that share of mind for the customer. Another, opportunity is how can you go and develop, like the takeaway side, right? Because you're still, again, in a market that is very driven by deals, very driven by opportunities and, by discounts and things like this, right? So, how can you be, creative enough to, then again, come up with, like solutions, offers that, are going to incentivize that customer to, to walk that 5 minutes to go to your store and pick up that deal, right? And, on our side, like, we brought, the meal plan delivery, and we literally, put that option as a pickup for our stores. So, it's something that we're only doing, via delivery. We're only, sending those daily meal plans, and we put, like that option, as a pickup option, and we put a 40% off versus the delivery price. And then we've seen a massive surge of people, like, all around, like regular customers that then, of course, like, they're being enticed by a very attractive price, and decide to just walk 5-10 minutes to go and pick up their, the daily meals, right? So, those are the, the ideas that we had. And of course, what, Tim mentioned, like, it's something that we've done as well. We've developed, like, an online, like, supermarket line that, we're also, like, bringing into actual supermarkets. So yes, like, I think that there's still opportunities. Unfortunately, there's also, like, the nature of your business. And, like, we're lucky enough that, like, we were prepared, but that we're also in a niche, meaning healthy eating, that, is also, like, growing in that point of time. And I think that, other, like, brands that are in more, like, very widespread, like, like, categories, is very difficult then to differentiate, and it's very difficult to, like, just, like, really stick out from the competition. So, it's going to be very, very tough.
Thanks for sharing the insights. So we have a few questions. I should take it out and answer during the challenges which are moving in. So here's the background. So some people say that the challenges that the F&B face are not about the technology, but about the mindset, right? So, for example, some of our F&B practitioners has been slower in terms to get on board some of the digital solutions. Case in point, some of the hawkers, and in a way they're affected by these measures as they are not quick enough to catch up. So I know that some of you already mentioned quite a lot of things that can be done. So, but anyone can chime in. How do you think, how should F&B adapt and cope with the challenges and changes? What should be the key area of focus? Okay, maybe I speak something that's on my mind. So just now, I think Keith mentioned that a lot of work needs to be done, even if you create an apps to grow the traffic, all this. Then again, when any F&B merchants in a shopping mall, they sell out an outlet, it's a 500,000 endeavor, right? 500,000, 750,000, sometimes more. And then they do a lot of things. So that's, and they willingly do it. They probably take a loan, get investment and so on. So right now there's a transformation. Do you think people will actively invest the same amount of money into the app that's going to save their business? I mean, some of the thoughts that I have. Keith, do you want to follow up and have your take on it?
I think Yeah, I mean, answer your question, no, I don't think they'll invest that amount of money. I think loyalty is something that people don't invest enough of, actually. There was a great article the other day on LinkedIn about the airline industry, how their biggest assets was their loyalty program, the millions of people they have on the database, and how you have no one from that loyalty program sitting on the board at any of these big airlines. So the airlines clearly still think that, you know, the planes and, you know, making sure people are flying bums on seats is the most important things, when they've got all of this data from millions and millions of people, customers. Why that is, I don't really know. Maybe because they've just spent, as you say, $500,000, $750,000, that there's not much left after. Maybe that's the reason why they're not investing. But, you know, we'll probably see a shift now as everything becomes more digital because of the virus, because of COVID-19. You know, people will start having to invest more in digitalizing. You know, before it was difficult to find a website on restaurants. A lot of people just use the Facebook page, for example. And, you know, that's pretty common. And I think going forward, I think you'll see it change. I do think for hawkers, it's tougher for the simple reason that the price point is low. And that's where the challenge is. I'm sure it's not a question of them not wanting to, but if you're paying $4, $5, $6, for example, for a meal at a hawker, and if you try and do the delivery yourself, you know, you're going to have to pay probably $12 for that delivery to happen. So that hawker meal suddenly goes from being, you know, $4, $5 to, you know, $16, $17, and it becomes more expensive. So it is tougher, but there are solutions out there. There's another company, I don't know what the company's name, but they are investing in delivering for hawkers. Whether that's a long-term play or that's just during these past 2 months, we'll have to wait and see.
Is that YQ?
That's it. YQ.
Yeah, YQ. Yeah.
Yeah. That's it.
No, I think that, you know, on my side, like what I can say, right, and, you know, and especially like, you know, when we look at, you know, this industry, right, the industry, and I come from, you know, a different background. I didn't come from, you know, the industry, you know, the F&B industry. I was working for LVMH, and then, as you mentioned, I also worked for Tony Fernandez. And, you know, like the first thing that shocked me, you know, like when I rejoined the industry is the lack of, you know, marketing activations. You know, and I think that, you know, everybody's always been focused on, you know, like traditional, you know, customers in and all this. But, you know, like I came from a background that is, you know, like, I mean, digital was everything, you know, like everybody was like preparing on, like, you know, pivoting, you know, digitally. And here you see very, very few brands, and, you know, and it's just retail. And I think that now the reality is we've all been given the same cards, and, you know, like, keeping a traditional business is just not going to work anymore, you know, unless you are, you know, you really have like a super established brand that, you know, customers are just gonna, like, you know, like really like find a way to just get to and you know, and continue in the business. But, you know, like you'll have to pivot, and you'll have to really start to see how you can keep on, like, you know, like recruiting customers online, you know, really, like, you know, gain share of mind, increase your presence, you know, like on a lot of different type of platforms, and you know, and make sure that you build something that is still sustainable and scalable. Because, you know, right now, like, you know, like, and we mentioned that at the start of the chat, you know, I paid top dollars, you know, to be in Raffles Place, you know, and why? Because the strength was, you know, numbers, traffic. And now the biggest strength, and the reason why you pay the biggest bucks, is literally becoming the biggest weakness, you know, in a matter of months, you know, like so how do you do that, right? And then I think then it brings the point of, like, you know, like landlords. And I think that's the, you know, probably, like, you know, the second biggest, if not the biggest conversation topic for, you know, the F&B industry right now. You know, like, how do you deal with this, right? How do you deal with, like, paying such high rents that demand, you know, really high turnover and really, you know, really big volume? And I think that's why it's going to cripple a ton of businesses.
Yeah.
So interesting that Alexis brought this up. So I think we have one question, which is like from the attendee. do you think the government should consider other solutions to improve the situation aside from just the subsidies and financial aid? Perhaps anyone, Keith, Tim, or even Alexis? So this was one question from the audience. So government, of course, has given a lot of things.
Yeah, they've given a lot. I think, I mean, it's never enough, right? But I think if you look at what the government has given out, I mean, it's pretty generous when I compare to other markets where we have presence in the world. It's pretty generous, but I think where the gap is definitely with the rent. And that's where the issue is, right? Because they've kind of solved the problem with the salary for the time being, and until the end of the year, which is a fantastic help. The biggest challenge now is that your two biggest overheads are your rent and your manpower. So your rent is now where the issue is, and as Alexis said, if you're paying top dollar to be in the CBD, you're paying top dollar. Not because you want to, it's because you're paying for that extra traffic. You're paying for that extra footfall, but that footfall no longer exists. It's gone. And you know what? It's not going to come back for a while. Like we're going into phase 2 tomorrow. Tomorrow it doesn't go back to 100%. If it did, it would be a different conversation. There's obviously reasons as to why we can't, but if it did, if tomorrow it was just a question of everything goes back to normal, then I think that's it. But I think now these next few months is where the challenge is going to be.
Maybe I set a background a bit. So I mean, so we were talking about renter, and we were talking about now you're paying for the renter for the traffic that is not coming, correct? So, but also Alexis mentioned digital. So digital is a very fair game. You pay advert dollars to Google or Facebook. They already show you how much traffic, and they charge you for the traffic, right? So do you think that it's reasonable to ask, maybe petition to the government in the form of a renter? Yes, the landlord can still charge a certain renter, but it's tied in to the actual consumption or the traffic that everyone wins. The landlord still get the rent, and the F&B merchants can be sustained. I mean, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I'll jump on that one. I think that ultimately, that's the reality, and yes, the government has been incredibly generous, but it's just basically buying us time is not really, it's not something that's sustainable for the industry, because as soon as the help is going to decrease, then the reality is going to be that traffic is not going to be there, and but your costs are going to be there, right? And rentals, staff, and the other overheads, right? So ultimately, right, I think that we really need to go and look into this, and I think that's what a lot of F&B some of the top F&B groups, we're trying to speak together and try to speak with the government to make something happen, because as it is right now, landlords and look, it's not like it's been a smooth process. I think that out of the three landlords I deal with, one really dealt nicely with with the situation. That the other two, there was zero communication, there was zero transparency, and then again you speak about traffic, and then again, how do you go and control this? How do you go and make sure that this is the right numbers that they communicate? So I think that the contract will have to change. It will have to be a sense of really being either GTO based or renegotiate the contract. But when you just see, even though the government were giving those subsidies, the way that the landlords were reacting, I don't think it's going to be a very positive conversation unless really the government is making a strong change. And so I think that's really what I think that's really the number one point that I think we need to work on, proper conversation, proper communication, and try to find some adjustments, for businesses. Everybody, we can't just be the only one to take everything, to take all the burden. The landlords need also to be involved and to carry this with us.
Okay, I think what Alexis shared pretty much answered the extra things, some of the extra things the government could help, especially with the renter and landlord, from the question. Okay, there are a few questions here. So all with regards to manpower. So I thought this is quite interesting. Anyone can chime in and answer. Some restaurants could command higher prices for their products because of the ambience that they offer during dine experience, right? Given the absence of dining experience during circuit breaker and phase 1, restriction during phase 2, what do you see are the impacts for these restaurants? And do you have any suggestions and strategies to combat this? I believe these attendees are probably referring to all these fine dining, the fine dining restaurants, those that have better ambience. Yeah, anyone of you?
I can give it a crack. So historically, Waiter hasn't worked with fine dining establishments, and that's because when you go to a fine dining establishment, generally you're wanting that customer service interaction. So you want someone to come over and hold your hand and talk you through the menu, make recommendations on what you should order, and give advice on what are the best things on the menu. And historically, Waiter has avoided that because our offering is to automate ordering and payment. And so that's sort of a transactional element. And our general positioning is that we could work with fine dining if you could educate customers that the order and payment is just a transaction and the customer service is all of those extra things, like finding out what the customer wants, educating them about what are the good things, and making sure they've got enough water and welcoming them and all of those things. And so I think that even in a post-COVID environment where you've got reduced capacity, you could still have a really great experience with fewer staff, provided you're doing it in the right way, I think. Now, I still don't think that customers would want to necessarily, like fine dining, places which have tablecloths and fine dining, I don't think that it would work to order from your QR code. But maybe there's a potential there. We've got more interest from restaurants that have a higher, I would say, caliber of clientele that they target. When I say caliber, I'm talking about average spend. And so I think that there's stuff that you can do there. I guess I don't know enough about the margins in those fine dining places to know whether they could operate at the reduced capacity. And so I know that, or what I'm hearing from restaurants is that people believe that given how long people have been trapped at home, they're going to be looking for a reason to go out. And so there'll be this, what they're calling a flight to quality. And so if they can go to a fine dining establishment where the tables are well spaced out, they know that hygiene is really important, they know that they're well taken care of, then they're going to have this great experience where they'll go there and they'll be prepared to pay higher prices because they know it's high quality. They know they're not going to be encountering other people and being exposed to the coronavirus. So I don't have an answer whether or not they'd be able to make enough money from the really high ticket from a reduced number of customers to offset their costs. So I don't know the answer. What do the other guys think?
Yeah, I think that I think that ultimately it will really depend on a lot of different players. Realistically, I think fine dining, they're going to suffer a lot by the reduced capacity, because then again, it's always about like in the F&B industry, you study your square footage, and it's all about the dollar per square foot, and that it's on rental, that it's on sales. And so, once you reduce your capacity, by half, it just messes with your bottom line. And so I think that it's going to be very, very difficult, for a lot of establishments. But also, then again, it's one of those situations where, we all dealt the same card. So how can you be creative, and how can you think ahead of the game, and how can you pivot to just really take this opportunity? Because, like Tim mentioned, I really believe, that customers have been stuck at home for a long time, and now they want to go out, they want to have that, that really good meal, and also some of them, they're willing to pay for that experience, So I think that, if restaurants are creative enough to build an experience, and I think that, you mentioned health and safety, and I think that that's a very, very important point. Make sure that, the system in place really, make your customer feel safe. And I think that's going to be very important for the ones who will come out on top, but yeah, I think it's really going to depend a lot on on the bottom line, but reduced capacity is going to be super tough.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for sharing. Yeah, I'm going to address these two other questions to you all, and then before we have a concluding questions. So there's this question, anyone can chime in, asking how will anyone or any of the cafes or any merchants that manage during the phase 2 when dine-in is happening tomorrow, but I think he's a restaurant owner. Most of our manpower are still heavily streamlined. So like Keith, team, any of your merchants share anything with you, or any insights?
I think a lot of people have been caught off guard. I mean, like it was announced on Tuesday evening, and you're expected to just be ready and to go on Friday. And I was at the office yesterday walking past, and I saw a couple of restaurants just in front of ours that were kind of shipping out, lorrying out some of their tables and chairs, because obviously they have to abide with the new spacing between the tables, and you don't want to have chairs and tables obviously stacked up. So yeah, I think it's going to take time. I can say from our experience that not everyone is opening yet. I think we found hotels, for example, a lot of them are still being used as government facilities, so they're not opening. Not all of them, obviously, but some of the ones that we work with. And we've also found that just not everyone is opening yet. They're doing it slowly because their manpower, they may depend on X amount of foreign labor as well, and obviously no one can come into the country. So if you have some manpower that lives in Malaysia, for example, it's not possible for them to come back in right now. So that's what we've seen in the past 48 hours, and just going off what I think Alexis was mentioning earlier, or to him about how the fine dining scene's managing. I thought it was interesting to see Chope announce, I think it was last night, that in the first couple of hours they received something like 10,000 reservations after it was announced, which is crazy. And I think people have been stuck in their houses for the last 2 months, that they obviously got a little bit excited.
Yeah, and to jump on that question as well, I think that it's it's gonna be quite interesting to see how everybody's gonna answer. But the reality is I think that. And for my personal case, I'm really looking at when offices are going to reopen, and I think that's really like the indicator, more than the government, telling us when to reopen. Because at the end of the day, if you reopen and you put your staff in, and you get the food prep, all your food ready, and then there's nobody in there, you're losing even more. And so I saw like some stats on offices, and even like right now, like offices and some of the biggest, offices like banks and all these, they're only allowing 10 to top 20% of their staff to go back. And I think that, a ton of companies give the options to employees, and employees prefer to work from home. So I think that, for all the restaurants that are very office crowd based, you will see those ones try to open as late as possible. And I think that's the reality. But it is definitely true. From what Keith mentioned, that you hear this on Tuesday, and then you're supposed to then open by Friday, and a lot of our staff are blocked. We have foreign workers, and they still have to to come back and stay here for 2 weeks in quarantine before they can come back, right? So I think that there's going to be a lot of adjustments. I definitely don't see. At least for my type of businesses, a big improvement. It's a step forward, and it's good to have a step forward after 2.5 months of a stagnation. But I think that it's still going to be very slow for us.
Okay, I think pretty much round up that questions. It's not easy. We have to make do with it. Okay, this is one last question from the floor. It is about jobs. Anyone have any advice on job opportunities, roles that are still available in the F&B industry despite the challenges? Like this attendee, of course, he's aware that it's tough. But guys, are there any still job opportunities from the panelists? Anyone?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think that there's still, there's still this issue with foreign workforce. I think right now, you have a lot of players that, looking for, for manpower, and then pivoting, there are big opportunities. And I think that, we've spoken and spent a lot of time in, you know, in addressing all the issues, but, you know, nonetheless, I think that there are really big opportunities, and, you know, and the industry is changing, you know, so, you know, that change will lead to, you know, big opportunities, and it would, you know, it will be up to the brands to, you know, to take on that challenge and grab those opportunities. Not everybody's going to be able to. A lot of brands sadly are going to die, and so it's really going to depend on, you know, where you are, how quick you can pivot, and, you know, and also how creative and how far you want to go, you know. But it's yeah, it's going to be a very interesting time. And, you know, I think that from a job perspective, you know, those companies that manage to thrive on that, you know, you'll still have some job opportunities, but let's be realistic that still in Singapore, you know, like the staffing in the F&B industry is extremely difficult, you know, so that's also like a big problem, you know, by itself.
Okay, thanks. Okay, I'm going to round it up. I'm just going to ask the last question. What's the one advice that you will give to a F&B merchant for the next 6 months? Some things that you will leave with them. Maybe I start with Keith. Like from everything you've seen,
so I think it's about you know, having the right size team right now, and to be honest, seeing this through, it's about minimizing your losses. I mean, now we go into phase 2. Obviously, for the last 2 months, there's, you know, even for a platform like ours, our revenue's been hit extremely hard. But, you know, I do think that that it's about seeing it through and minimizing costs, and making sure that every month it's, you know, you get as close to break even as you possibly can. Because once we get through this, and obviously there is light at the end of the tunnel, we will eventually go back to normal. I'm sure of it.
Thanks, Keith. What about Tim?
Mine's very, very similar to Keith. So minimize your fixed cost wherever you can. So Alexis mentioned rent, which is a very tricky one. So minimize your fixed costs. Try to keep your variable costs as low as possible. So then every time you make a sale, you're making contribution margin on that. So the ones, I think what Alexis was saying earlier about the industry not really caring about customer loyalty or customer retention, I think the brands that will survive will be able to profit in the long term, because the weaker ones, which don't have the cash reserves, will die. And then that'll free up some space in the market for the stronger players who have the cash reserves to get premium locations. And so if you can survive, and if you can build customer loyalty, build customer brand. So if you've got a high quality product and you've got a great experience for customers, and you're able to get repeat customers, you'll succeed. The challenge is whether you can survive long enough, which is why I started this answer by saying, minimize your fixed cost and focus on working on your variable costs. Then if you can do that and contribute towards increasing repeat customers, then I think you'll be strong in the long term.
Thanks, Tim. Alexis?
Yeah, no, I think, you know, like, so obviously the bottom line is, you know, it's extremely important, you know, like at this stage, you know, like it's really about surviving. But, you know, like, I think that, you know, on my side is also mindset. And this is what I've told my team, you know, like from the beginning is, you know, like there's surviving and there's trying to thrive, you know, and so, you know, like, of course it's a matter of like what ammunition do you have, but it's also a matter of mindset, you know. And what is very important, you know, and I'll say to all these business owners out there is, you know, number one is manage your team, and manage the moral of your team, and manage the spirit of your team, and, you know, speak about, you know, like be positive and communicate often with them, because I think that everybody's scared, you know. And you know, and everybody's wondering, all right, am I going to keep my job, right? And sometimes when you're the owner, you don't pay attention to those things. You know, you're just trying to survive, and you're just trying to find like, okay, where can I cut costs and all these. But you know, I think like speaking with your staff, communicating with your staff, explain exactly what the company is going to do and the opportunities is very important. The second thing is, you know, like try to be creative and try to really see like, you know, where the opportunities are going to be, and think where the market is going to move towards, and how can you anticipate these things, and how can you really turn, you know, like a situation of crisis into an opportunity. And, you know, and in our company, like I'm very lucky to, you know, to be surrounded by, you know, like, you know, people who have the same mindset, and we're very positive. And I really believe that, you know, we came up with solutions that are going to change our company and that's going to change the game. And I think that, you know, like I really want to bring that positivity message, you know, to everyone, and thinking that, you know, like as long as you're a team, and as long as, you know, you really try to take like one problem at a time, you know, and try to really stay positive, you know, like you're much more likely to attract like positive outcome. You know, so, you know, and I said that to some of, you know, like my friends. Yes, you know, like controlling the bottom line is extremely important. You know, buy yourself time, but also like, you know, like put a lot of your time on how can you, you know, develop your business still, and how can you like recoup some of those sales. And, you know, don't just be like, you know, focus on like dealing with, you know, with landlords and just trying to like cut cost, you know, you know, try to see where the opportunity is going to be, because, you know, what Keith mentioned, and it is very true. The one was, you know, like the most ammunition and, you know, the better cash flow are going to be able to survive and write this, you know. And once you survive and you write this, I think there's going to be tremendous opportunities from a real estate point of view, you know, from a cost per acquisition point of view. And I just give you like an element, you know, digitally right now. You know, Facebook is at an all-time low. Like advertising on Facebook, you know, the cost per, you know, like customer acquisition is at all-time low. So there are opportunities for you to be able to like really like, you know, invest your money smartly and to develop, you know, your business. So I think that as soon as we are able to like, you know, ride that wave, and there's definitely light at the end of the tunnel, then there's going to be tremendous opportunity. And I think that, you know, it starts today, you know, to be ready for them.
Thank you, Alexis. And thank you for sharing all this and having me as a moderator. And thank you for the audience for the questions and for the engagement. As a learning experience for me. Now I will hand over to the organizer, Sophie. You can take over now.
Thank you, Ebenezer.
Yeah.
Tim, Keith, Alexis, thank you very much for your time today, sharing with us your useful views, a very reflective session of the current situation. Thank you, participants, for joining us. Please submit your feedback after you exit this webinar. Join us next week for a breakfast session with John Friedman of AG Funder. So he's going to talk about the evolution of agri-food tech and investing with impact at 9:30 a.m. So if you want to contact any of the panelists here, feel free to reach out to them on LinkedIn or through me, Sophia. So I'm signing out. Stay safe and stay well. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. 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 Bye.